Hello, everybody, and happy holidays from the Pennsylvania Earth Sciences Association, and PISA presents with Stegosaurus, a real post-Thanksgiving treat for you with this absolutely wonderful dinosaur. So today we're going to be looking into some of the myths and misconceptions concerning Stegosaurus itself, and by that I mean the three actual species of the genus Stegosaurus. So altogether, Stegosauria is a clade. There are many, many species in the clade Stegosauria. Now, just for purposes of keeping things simple and relatively concise, we're just looking at the three species of the genus Stegosaurus: Stegosaurus stenops, and then S. sulcatus, and then S. ungulatus. And that, first of all, is one of the many myths about Stegosaurus, because you'll see in a lot of different places that there's more than three species. Nope, sorry, there's only three, and there's just those specific three. So some of the actual characteristics of them is that Stenops is about 21 foot long. It had large and broad plates, and it's known from several skeletons. Then also too, you have furrowed spikes and longer hind limbs and more pointed plates in the other two respectively. So this right here is the Morrison Formation. It's found in the western United States, which is where the Stegosaurus fossils that have been found in the United States are from. Now, said fossils are 155 to 145 million years old, and like I said, they've been found in the western United States. In addition, they've also been found in Portugal. And very recently, there is a Stegosaurid fossil found in China. Where it fits in the entire general stegosaur family tree is something that paleontologists are still arguing about. So notice how I said arguing. So that's one of those things that I just wanted to throw that out there just to say that yes, there has been one found in China very recently, but where it fits into the general scheme of things is something that they haven't quite figured out yet. Now, the three that we're concerned with are upwards of 14 foot tall and 30 feet long. Now, this guy right here, Arthur Lakes, he's one of the great unsung heroes of dinosaur paleontology. He was a real jack of all trades. Not only was he an absolutely wonderful geologist and great stratigrapher, but he did wonderful just field work in paleo, and he was actually also a clergyman. Now, here is another artwork that he did. Now, so he did lots of different expeditions doing paleo work, various other field work, and one of the people that he did field work with was this fellow right here, O.C. Marsh of the Bone Wars fame. Now, Marsh is often incorrectly credited with discovering the Stegosaurus. Nope, it was Arthur Lakes. Ding, 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 ding. And it happened in 1877. Now, a little quick side piece trivia right here. So, Lakes had a protege, one Peter Dodson, and Lakes may or may not have actually been with Dodson at this time, but a very recent discovery, just to show you how significant this guy is and how sadly history has kind of passed him by, was that the two of them, probably again together, wound up finding something that had been discovered as, well, described, sorry, as a quote, saurian tooth at South Table Mountain in Colorado. And this information had been passed along to Marsh. And yes, this is actually, we now know, the first recorded fossil of none other than Tyrannosaurus rex. So Arthur Lakes was a very significant man indeed, my friends. Now, so the discovery of, I almost said Styracosaurus for some reason in my mind. Ooh, boy, did my brain go in the wrong place. The discovery of Stegosaurus and its naming is kind of like a comedy of errors in paleontology, but that's something that we're going to go into right now. So now when you look at something like this, articulated skeletons in museums are the end result of just many, many, many hours of painstaking work of professionals, and also it's the end result of just years of experience in the field. I mean, it took a very long time for paleontologists and just museum professionals to learn how you do things like that. And really also too, there's a lot in terms of just how an animal stands and carries itself. Things which are argued about an awful lot, trust me, still in the field nowadays. So, one of the weirdest stories in paleo, how the how the type specimen of Stegosaurus got changed. So when a species is classified, the specimen that basically gets it to be its own species is called the type specimen. That gets to be the, I mean, it's this big, huge thing. Very, very, very rare does a species have its type specimen changed, especially something as famous as Stegosaurus. I mean, Stegosaurus is consistently ranked amongst the top 5 most famous dinosaurs, often amongst the top 3. And so for it to have its type specimen changed, I mean, something seriously happened. And this is what happened. So this gets kind of interesting. So 1877, dinosaurs found, right? So Marsh at first named these finds Stegosaurus armatus. He's looking at this box of fossils that he had, and he's kind of like, what is this? Because he's looking at this and he's looking at stuff that is making him kind of feel like, okay, this is kind of sus. And because, I mean, keep in mind, for those that haven't heard of O.C. Marsh, he's one of the formative giants of the field of paleontology, especially early paleo. I mean, this guy was smart, but you got to keep in mind that back at this time, paleontology was still in its infancy stages. I mean, every field has its baby steps, right? So when this guy is looking at fossils of a giant dinosaur that hasn't really been classified yet, obviously something that looks like a Stegosaurus. I mean, how in God's name is this guy supposed to realize, hey, this is what I'm looking at? I mean, nobody could do that. So he was kind of thinking, well, maybe I'm looking at a turtle. Maybe he was thinking that at first the plates are some sort of almost like a roofing sort of effect. Maybe that's like a shell that's going up across the top of it. And then there are all different types of other fossils that were mixed up. Like accidentally, Marsh had mixed up fossils of Diplodocus within the specimen that actually became the type specimen for Stegosaurus armatus. And then also too, he had, do not ask me how this happened, I kid you not, he had actually mixed up fossils of Allosaurus in there too as well. That I will grant you is a bit of a stretch. Okay, that is a bit of a much. So now, nowadays, if you see a source use the species name Stegosaurus armatus, that is what is called a dubious species. In other words, it's a species that is no longer actually accepted by mainstream paleontology. So it's not necessarily that perhaps that source doesn't really know what they're talking about as much, but it's just so that you guys know, if you see somebody talking about S. armatus or Stegosaurus armatus, that's not an accepted species anymore, because as scientists found out, it was actually classified literally from a mismatch of fossils that were not only just various species, but actually plant and meat eaters combined. And it wasn't until a find by one Marshall Felch in 1885 that we really started to get a solid look in terms of what Stegosaurus actually did look like. So now, this is the first mounted skeleton of a stegosaur. This was mounted at the Peabody Museum, which Marsh had a very good relationship with. And if y'all have never been to the Peabody, oh my God, I cannot recommend it anymore. It's a wonderful, wonderful museum. Absolutely wonderful. So now, this skeleton first was mounted in 1910. So yes, 1877 to 1910, that's a lot of years, but again, you know, baby steps. It takes a lot of time to get these specimens together, get enough fossils together to articulate a skeleton to get enough to display. So now there are two major problems with this in terms of museum displays. Well, yes, its stance is incorrect. but really in terms of how it is set up, how it is displayed. First of all, the Thagomizers. That is the actual term for the spikes on the tail. There are too many Thagomizers on the tail. There are also the plates. Now, the most famous feature of a stegosaur are, of course, the plates. Now, to radiate or not to radiate, that is the question. Obviously, when you find a stegosaur in situ, in other words, in the ground, when the thing dies and then it gets fossilized, vast majority of the time, the plates are not going to stick to the thing. Now, we have actually still very, very few fossils with the plates still attached to the skin. And in every case, every single one of those fossils, the plates alternate. So it is now accepted that the plates are supposed to alternate on displays in museums, which is why you see that nowadays. They're not paired like they are here. They actually alternate, and that's actually why when you pull this up, this photo is on the public domain right now because it's so old, but when you pull this up on Wikipedia, it's actually cited as being inaccurate because it shows inaccurate anatomical information because of that fact. Now, also too, another main thing with the plates is what was their function. Now, a lot of people will tell you that they radiated heat, that they served as some sort of thermoregulation factor. But really, that is not actually established completely. And also too, people will say, well, perhaps that they were just for ornamentation or some sort of decoration, or they were just meant to look good. Really, with Stegosaurus, sadly, we can never really tell, and the purpose of what its plates ultimately served will most likely go down as the greatest mystery about the dinosaur altogether. So the biggest plates were over its hips. They could be up to 2 feet square, and there were usually 17 to 22 of them, and several flat spines, which were smaller plates that were narrower enough that they didn't kind of have that almost triangular look to them. Now, the plates were modified osteoderms, or basically bony scales, like big bony scales. This is the aforementioned Thagomizer. Yes, this is after a Far Side cartoon. So this is a case of kind of like an Easter egg or an in-joke that went way, 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 way too far and actually became canon. It was amazing, really. So in 1982, this Farsar cartoon was published, and paleontologists kind of thought it was funny, and it was like, hey, we should actually start calling them that. And they did, and it started to be taken seriously, and then it got to be taken so seriously that now the term for the spikes is Thagomizers, and they can be up to 3 feet long. About 2 to 3 feet long is kind of like a pretty good size for them. And as they're often found damaged, it is theorized that they were used decently in combat or for basically like going back and forth in between various stegosaurs, in not necessarily like combat in terms of like fighting each other, but maybe like territorial, like going back and forth over food or say like a mate, something like that. Now, this is a lovely mounted skeleton of Stegosaurus. Her name is Sophie. She's in the Natural History Museum of London. She's quite possibly the most complete mounted skeleton that we have. Now, this actually threw me. Was looking in a couple of sources online when I was doing the image sources for this, and quite a few sources I was finding was actually saying for some odd reason that Triceratops was basically like the great-great-great-grandson of Stegosaurus. That is so completely not even close to true that I have no idea where that story could even come from. The closest major relatives to stegosaurs are ankylosaurs. Ceratopsia, which is the group that Triceratops comes from, is a distant cousin group, and they're not descended from them in any way whatsoever. So, feathers. Okay, bring this up in pretty much every dinosaur-based one. Now, yes, there is some argument with stegosaurs having what is called, quote, modified quill structures. But then you look at some other paleontologists, and they point to those same exact structures and they say, no, they are not modified quill structures. Instead of being X, they are really being Y. So really, there's a lot of debate going back and forth about that, but altogether, overwhelmingly, the evidence with those three key stegosaurs shows that no, they most likely did not have feathers. Now, one thing that they did have, and they get a lot of flack for, is having a small brain. But having a small brain does not mean that you're dumb. I mean, lots of people out there have a pretty fair-sized brain, and I think we all know somebody that you just look at someone and you just shake your head and be like, how did you manage to wake up this morning and not, like, fall out of bed flat on your face? So just because you have a smaller brain, it's really what you make of it. So now, how did this start? Because there's a lot of myths about Stegosaurus and their brain, even that they have two brains, hence the title of this. So now, the aforementioned O.C. Marsh once noted a large area in the hip region of the spinal column that it was like open. And this led to a big thing. And a lot of people were just, there's a brain there and it must control the tail. And because they reasoned that because the tail was so elaborate and it had the Thagomizers on it, then it must need a second brain to control it. And it's just, who knows how some of these weird things actually start. And this is even before the internet. Oh my God, can you imagine how stuff like that starts nowadays and with how like viral things begin? Now, what that really is that is probably the source of what is called a glycogen body. Now, glycogen body is something that a lot of animals, like two stegosaurids, have. Its purpose is kind of nebulous, but it's just basically, it's a source for glycogen in various animals. It can have a neurologic function, it can have several other functions, but instead of having a second brain, no, sorry folks, stegosaurids did not have two brains. That was instead really just a glycogen body. And no, having a small brain didn't necessarily mean that they were stupid or not able to adapt very easily. They were just, you know what? Here's the thing about that whole brain deal, guys. So you're talking about a dinosaur that was alive 150 million years ago. Totally different type of environment, totally different type of conditions. They were well adapted to their own environment. They were so well adapted to their own environment that their species lasted for 10 million years. So I think they did darn good, so let's stop calling them stupid, shall we? Now, April 28th, 1982. A fourth grade class, God bless them, campaign for 2 years straight. And then finally, Governor Richard D. Lamb, bless you, sir, signed in the Stegosaurus as the official state fossil of Colorado. And I don't know why, but I just saluted the screen and they can't even see me. So still, I'm very proud of that. So thank you all that did that. Now, speaking of thank you, now said earlier about the popularity of some of the dinosaurs and how Stegosaurus is often in the top. The most popular often is our friend the Tyrannosaurus, followed by number 2 is Triceratops, and oftentimes number 3 in the top is Stegosaurus. So thank you very much from all of us. And again, we hope that you have a very, very happy holiday, far and wide. And just, you know what? Thank you for joining us. And if you like this, please give us a like and subscribe. And enjoy the rest of your week now.